I'm not implying anything when I bring this subject up, but maybe there's one more move Kyle Dubas will have in him. Good morning to you. Good Monday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Yeah, it's been good lately. There's even an extra body, an extra participant, an extra competitor within the top 6 forward group. I don't know how many of us were expecting that to materialize. But yeah, Rutger McGroarty's here. And if he makes the team, theoretically, someone else will have to come out of that group because he's got to be on the top 2 lines. And just saying that would suggest that your top 2 lines are pretty much where you'd want them to be. Bottom 6, I mean, I don't know if the NHL will allow Dubas to add anybody else to that mix. There's already, at last count, probably 74 guys competing for 6 spots. Well, 5 really, because Lars Eller has one of them. And the hot rumor now is that Emil Bemstrom is still on the roster. Has not been confirmed. But my sources are swearing this is a possibility. And the defense, look, you've got your top 3, not your top 4, sewn up. Obviously. Chris Letang, Erik Karlsson, Marcus Pettersson. And I'm of the belief that Ryan Graves has to be put into that top 4. At the very least, he has to be in your top 6. So what are we talking about with a couple other spots? Jack St. Ivan, he has to play. He has to play. That doesn't mean that if he has a crappy camp, he's won a spot. But, you know, if he shows you anything at all akin to what he showed you late last season, he has to play. And you have a whole army of people, notably Matthew Grzelcyk, who's probably got the upper hand on the either second or third left-handed defense spot. But again, there you go. And goaltending is goaltending. Even if you don't like what you see from Tristan Jarry or Alex Nedeljkovic, you've got not one but 2 kids, Sergei Murashov and Yoel Blomqvist, ready to push them, maybe ready to push them out. So what would be your move? What would be the thing that you'd look for? What would be an acquisition that could be made, even if it's just a pure hockey trade? Meaning, you know, we've got too many of this, but we could use one of those. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Well, setting aside the absurd/fantasy stuff like trading off Graves for, you know, a first-round pick or trading off Graves really for anything, if I were looking for a trait in a player that I'd want to acquire, even with the roster as it is, I'm still looking for goals. I'm still looking for someone with the very specific skill of shooting the hockey puck. Nothing was more unsettling in my mind than this team's inability to do exactly that thing in the 2023-24 season. Not just on the power play either. This was not a great finishing team. The Penguins generated a lot of shots. The Penguins generated a lot of high danger chances. What they didn't generate, commensurate to all of that, were goals. And bear in mind that this is going to be the first full season without Jake Guentzel. And say what you want about how that trade went, and obviously it's infinitely better in hindsight than it was in the moment, Jake's goals aren't going to get replaced by Michael Bunting. So there's at least a reasonable chance that this offense will be that much worse in the coming season, barring some epic revival of the power play. So what would I be looking for that would be, feasible, I'm going to throw out a name here, and this isn't even the name that I want, but this is the name that I always think of whenever I'm looking for depth scoring. Tomas Tatar. Hey, he's never been a Penguin. He's not going to be one this season either. But Tatar is that dude that everybody always lets sit around in free agency till like mid-September. And then everyone goes, whoa, Tatar's still out there. And he can be had for nothing. And then they pick up Tatar and he goes somewhere and pops 20 goals. A little bit lesser scale, Danton Heinen. Heinen is funny. He wouldn't surprise you if he got a hat trick. And he wouldn't surprise you if he went 25 games without a goal. But he could definitely finish. We saw that. And I don't know that player exists. I don't know what the Penguins do in their top six if, for example, two players are out of that group. Do you move Eller up? Do you move Kevin Hayes up? Do you move an Anthony Beauvillier, Blake Lizotte type? Lizotte's done some of that in Los Angeles. I don't know. But that's the one that I would say, yeah, if you can pull that off, go ahead and get it. And then bump some of these other guys that much lower on the depth chart. But even that might be a mistake, because if you put someone like that in a bottom six role to start out, again, as we saw with Heinen, they don't necessarily fit that role, and they can throw off your vibe that you're trying to achieve with your third and fourth lines. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from John, and it's in response to the Friday episode of Daily Shot of Penguins, in which I really praised passionately the selections of both Kevin Stevens and Matt Cullen into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, distinction between that and the main one in Toronto. And to that, John says, DK, it's always going to irk me that Cam Neely is in the main Hall of Fame and Artie isn't. They're the same story in many ways. Absolute supernova peaks, cut short or otherwise impacted by injury. For those of you who don't go this far back in hockey, I'll try to synopsize what John's bringing up here. Stevens and Neely were the preeminent power forwards. There were a couple others in there that I would throw in very, very comfortably, but those were the two that were popping 50 goals and were just unstoppable forces until they were stopped. And in Stevens' case, of course, it was the hit from Rich Pilon that knocked him out and sent him face first to the ice, requiring a complete reconstruction and all kinds of other rehab. In Neely's case, he had his knee basically wiped out by the Penguins' Ulf Samuelsson, who had no issue wiping out Neely and doing whatever else he had to for the Penguins to get past the Bruins and win their Stanley Cup. Say what you want about Ulfie, and plenty was said at the time, particularly from the Boston direction, but you wanted Ulfie on your team and not on the other team. And yeah, Neely made it and Artie didn't. Their numbers would suggest that they should have had an equal opportunity or close to equal opportunity. Artie had more points. Neely had 395 goals to Artie's 327. And being that they were power forwards known principally for scoring goals, maybe that's the difference. But do you want to know the truth here? I mean, the real truth. And this is not the sort of thing that people in the hockey world talk about all that lightly. I do, because it's a subject that really bothers me. But for the longest time, the Hockey Hall of Fame, again, the one in Toronto, was just the Canadian good old boys network. So to one point, Neely was born in British Columbia, good Western Canadian boy, honest, hardworking, whatever. And he was robbed of several years of his career by one of what the Canadians used to call chicken Swedes. They would portray a lot of the Scandinavian players, and to a lesser extent, really the Russian players, as being, cheap and dirty behind the play, as if the Canadians didn't somehow breed Bobby Clarke. So that narrative would work in favor of Neely. Let's give him something because he's owed this. Artie, obviously American, one of the thickest Boston accents since like John Adams. And Artie's injury wasn't the kind that got discussed as much because it wasn't seen as controversial. Pilon didn't really do anything all that wrong. It's just the way the visor connected and then the face hit the ice. So that's actually the best answer that I can give you. But I will say this too. I've not heard many people over the years make much of a case for Artie to get in. So I think this is more about why did you put Neely in than why didn't you put Artie in. Neely does not have Hall of Fame numbers. I don't want Bernie Federko in the Hall of Fame, and he had 1,000 points. Neely had 700. I don't want goal scorers with less than 400, really with less than 500 getting in, meaning if that's their principal job. So Neely really shouldn't have been in. Neely was in because of the narrative. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. And look, before I go, I don't want to dismiss that other players along the way could have qualified for the Hall. Artie was a big, big, big figure, and I mean that in every way, toward the Penguins' inaugural championships. And to that end, he really helped to change the course of this franchise from, well, till now. I mean, you don't know if you don't get the first one, whether you're going to get the second, much less the third, the fourth, the fifth. But I did hear people over the years, as thoroughly unlikable as he was, and I'm sure he is, making cases for Tom Barrasso. Well, Barrasso eventually got in, much to my surprise, but he did. I haven't heard that about Artie, and I don't expect to hear it about any other Penguins from that generation. So anyway, let's do this again tomorrow.